Welcome the anointed ones. Every pattern breaks the moment the person it was built to contain stops playing their assigned role. That's the line nobody told you, but life kept trying to show you. And if you're watching this right now, it's because you made one move, one silent, unexpected, unapologetic shift that flipped an entire spiritual ecosystem upside down. You didn't even realize how big it was at the time. You were busy surviving, healing, minding your business, maybe even eating rice and stew like nothing happened. Meanwhile, the spiritual realm was glitching like an old TV trying to find signal. Here's a fact most people don't know. Over 90% of human behavior runs on subconscious pattern loops, habits, reactions, emotional programming, generational conditioning. That means most people are living on autopilot, repeating cycles they didn't choose, reacting from wounds they didn't heal, and fighting battles they didn't start. But you, yes, you, somehow stepped off the conveyor belt. You broke the loop that was designed to keep you predictable, small, and spiritually stagnant. And the wildest part? You didn't break it with force. You didn't break it by screaming, announcing your healing journey on Facebook, or doing a dramatic exit. No, you broke it with one unseen, internally shifting move that even you can barely explain. Something in you just said, enough. And everything you were too humble to brag about, too tired to argue about, too evolved to repeat, collapsed the entire cycle. Your enemies only realized you broke the pattern after their old tactics stopped working. They tried the guilt. They tried the shame. They tried the manipulation. They even tried the "let me pretend I've changed" routine. But the old version of you, the one who tolerated nonsense in the name of peace, didn't show up this time. You confused them. You scared them. You spiritually outmaneuvered them without raising a finger. It's like your spirit updated to the latest version while everyone else was still on the beta test. And now? They're just standing there, blinking, confused, trying to figure out how you slipped out of the emotional maze that trapped everyone else before you. The move you made wasn't loud, but it was legendary. It wasn't physical, but it was cosmic. And whether you realize it or not, you just rewrote a narrative that was hundreds of years old in your bloodline. So buckle up, because today we're unpacking how chosen ones break generations of spiritual patterns with one move nobody saw coming, not even the people who created the pattern in the first place. Number 1, they didn't realize you broke the pattern. Because you didn't announce the break. Most people think that breaking a cycle has to be loud, dramatic, and visible. They imagine fireworks, confrontations, or some big declaration that everyone notices. But the truth is, the most powerful shifts happen quietly, invisibly, and without fanfare. That's exactly what you did. You broke the pattern silently, internally, and deliberately, without needing anyone else to witness it. You didn't tell them you were done. You didn't post about it on social media. You didn't make speeches or throw tantrums. You simply stopped participating in the cycle, and that alone was enough to make everything crumble. Patterns survive because they are fed by predictable behavior, repeated reactions, and unconscious compliance. The moment you removed yourself from that equation, everything that depended on you staying the same lost its power. People who thought they had you figured out suddenly couldn't predict your next move. They didn't understand why their old tactics, strategies, or manipulations stopped working. They expected the same reactions, the same vulnerabilities, the same emotional loops, but you didn't give them any of it. You weren't performing for them anymore, and the cycle could not continue without your cooperation. The brilliance of this move lies in its invisibility. While others struggle to make themselves heard or to prove they've changed, you quietly rewired your life from the inside out. The patterns that once controlled you, generational curses, toxic relationships, emotional traps, folded in on themselves because their fuel was no longer available. You didn't need permission to grow. You didn't need validation to evolve. And because you didn't announce it, no one could prepare for it, counter it, or stop it. Breaking a pattern without announcement is a kind of spiritual mastery. It's knowing that true power is not in being seen, but in being unshakable from within. Your silent move was a declaration in itself. The cycle no longer has authority over you, and that alone changes everything. You didn't need to fight the pattern. The moment you refused to play, it collapsed on its own. Number 2, you didn't fight the cycle. You outgrew its purpose. Most people think breaking a cycle means constant struggle, pushing, or confrontation. They believe patterns are defeated through force, by arguing, resisting, or proving themselves. But the chosen one knows the truth. Cycles aren't broken by fighting them. They collapse when they no longer serve you. That's exactly what you did. You didn't waste your energy on resistance or rage. You simply evolved past what the cycle demanded of you. Your growth made the old system irrelevant. The patterns were designed to trap someone at a certain level of thinking, emotional response, and reaction. Once you moved beyond that level, the cycle couldn't reach you anymore. Outgrowing a cycle isn't visible at first. People around you might not notice immediately. They expect you to remain in the same loops, to react predictably, to fall into the traps that once held you. But you've upgraded your awareness, your emotional intelligence, and your spiritual alignment. The behaviors, triggers, and expectations that used to control you became meaningless because you no longer fit the framework. Your reactions changed, your perspective shifted, and suddenly the old rules no longer applied. The brilliance of this move is that it's invisible to those who are still trapped. They think the cycle is ongoing because they measure it by past patterns, but the moment you outgrow its purpose, it's over. You didn't need confrontation to assert your freedom. You didn't need to explain your choices. Your evolution was enough to render the old system powerless. Outgrowing a pattern is a quiet but devastating victory. It leaves those who tried to control or manipulate you bewildered because nothing they've done or said can pull you back into the old loops. The chains are gone, not because they were broken, but because they were left behind. Your growth didn't just free you, it exposed the weakness in the very pattern that tried to define you. You became untouchable, not by fighting, but by becoming something the cycle was never meant to contain. Your unseen move wasn't just survival, it was transcendence. Number 3, your one move, was choosing internal order over external approval. Most people live their lives chasing approval like it's oxygen. They bend, they compromise, they shrink themselves just to fit the mold someone else designed for them. But the chosen one learns that no external applause can replace inner alignment. You made the move that changes everything. You stopped caring about whether people liked what you were doing or whether they approved of the decisions you were making. You stopped prioritizing their comfort over your clarity. You realized that the chaos they created, the judgment they threw, the expectations they enforced, they all existed to control you, to make you dance to their rhythm. When you chose internal order, you created a center of gravity that nothing outside could shake. You didn't need validation to keep moving forward. You didn't need recognition to feel successful. That shift alone disrupted every pattern built to manipulate you because patterns rely on reaction. Patterns survive on your compliance, on your constant need for their acceptance. By anchoring yourself to your own internal compass, you broke the system silently but irreversibly. The power of this move is subtle but devastating. People who used to hold influence over you suddenly lose all leverage because you no longer operate according to their rules. Their attempts to shame, guilt, or manipulate you bounce off because you have your own internal logic, your own internal law. They don't understand it because they're still stuck trying to control people with fear, uncertainty, and expectation. But you aren't moving in their field anymore. You're operating in a different dimension, one where the opinions of others hold no weight unless they resonate with your inner truth. This choice, simple yet radical, is what separates the chosen ones from everyone else. It's what makes you untouchable in ways people don't immediately see. You didn't overthrow the pattern by confrontation. You did it by loyalty to yourself. That invisible allegiance to your own order over their approval is the move that unravels the spiritual chains, and it's a power they can't calculate or contain. Number 4. You confused your opponents by not reacting the way they trained you to. Patterns survive because they rely on predictability. People who manipulate, control, or try to trap others depend on the assumption that reactions will follow a set rhythm. They expect anger, guilt, fear, or self-doubt, and they use those reactions like levers to move you exactly where they want. But the chosen one makes one subtle, invisible shift that changes everything. You stopped reacting the way they trained you to. You didn't give them the expected response, and in that moment, the entire system lost its bearings. When someone tries to control you, they are counting on your emotional predictability. They craft scenarios, plant triggers, and set up situations designed to provoke a reaction that reinforces their control. You broke that formula. You didn't respond with panic, anxiety, or defensiveness. You didn't rise to the bait or fall into the trap. By refusing to play by their rules, you essentially became unreadable. They couldn't anticipate your next move because you had stopped being the version of yourself they conditioned. That single shift is devastating in its effectiveness. This move doesn't require words or confrontation. It's the quiet mastery of knowing that your power lies in self-control and awareness, not in reacting to every provocation. When you refuse to perform according to someone else's programming, their influence over you collapses. They are left bewildered, scrambling to regain control over someone who is no longer available for their manipulation. The genius of this approach is that it's both simple and permanent. Every tactic, every attempt to pull you back into the pattern fails because you have redefined the rules for yourself. You didn't just evade the cycle, you became untouchable within it. By not reacting as expected, you turned the energy that was meant to control you into a void, a space where their power no longer exists. That unseen move is what makes you unbreakable and uncontainable. And it's the reason your enemies are left confused, frustrated, and powerless while you continue moving forward, calm and untethered. Number 5. Your discernment evolved. Faster than their manipulation, manipulators, controllers, and toxic people rely on the assumption that everyone will respond to them in predictable ways. They depend on your blind spots, your wounds, and your unhealed patterns to push you into corners, guilt, or fear. But the chosen one operates differently. You didn't just resist their tactics, you evolved your discernment at a speed they couldn't anticipate. While they were still plotting the next move, analyzing your past reactions, and designing the perfect trap, you had already stepped out of their field of influence. Your perception upgraded faster than their strategy could keep up. Discernment isn't just about noticing obvious red flags or avoiding obvious danger. It's the deep, internal sense that tells you what is aligned with your purpose and what is not. It's the ability to see the intentions behind words, the manipulation behind gestures, and the energy behind situations. You honed that skill quietly, invisibly, and deliberately. By the time they tried to act, their efforts were already obsolete. They were using old maps while you were navigating a new dimension of awareness. Their control required ignorance and predictability, and you stopped providing both. What makes this move so powerful is that it's invisible to others. People around you may not understand how you always seem one step ahead, how nothing phases you, or why their tactics consistently fail. They attribute it to luck, timing, or coincidence. But the truth is far deeper. Your mind, spirit, and emotional intelligence evolved to a level that their manipulation could not touch. They can't calculate your awareness because it operates on a frequency they've never learned to detect. This evolution doesn't just protect you, it dismantles the system built to trap you. When discernment outpaces manipulation, control becomes impossible. People who once had power over your reactions suddenly find themselves powerless. Their influence evaporates not through confrontation, but through your superior perception and inner alignment. That unseen, evolutionary leap is a spiritual weapon, one that breaks cycles, silences toxicity, and leaves you untouchable in a way no one else can replicate. Number 6. You became unpredictable. Because you finally started thinking for yourself. Most patterns survive because people are predictable. They follow scripts written by fear, habit, or other people's expectations. But you, the chosen one, made the move that changes everything. You stopped living according to someone else's script. You began thinking for yourself, and in that freedom, you became unpredictable. Suddenly, the tactics, manipulations, and pressures that once worked on you lost all effect. People who had control over you suddenly found themselves facing someone who could no longer be forecasted, calculated, or contained. The power of unpredictability comes from independence. When you start making decisions based on your own understanding, values, and awareness, no one can anticipate your next move. Your reactions no longer fit the patterns that were once used to guide or manipulate you. You didn't have to fight anyone or prove a point. You simply stopped reacting according to old expectations. That quiet refusal to be predictable is both a shield and a weapon. It confuses those who thrive on control and exposes the weakness in systems built on obedience and familiarity. Unpredictability isn't about chaos or rebellion, it's about alignment. Every choice you make is rooted in your own clarity, not in responding to fear, guilt, or pressure. That means people who try to manipulate you suddenly lose their footing because their influence relied on your compliance. They can't manipulate a mind that doesn't follow the anticipated route. Every strategy they used fails because you refuse to play by rules you never agreed to. By thinking for yourself, you've elevated your power in ways they cannot touch. You operate on a plane that is detached from their control, free from their programming, and untouchable by their expectations. The moment you chose your own mind over the narrative others wrote for you, you became a force that cannot be contained. Your unpredictability isn't reckless, it's a declaration of sovereignty. And that single move, unseen and silent, is what breaks cycles, disarms manipulation, and leaves your enemies bewildered while you move forward, unshaken and untouchable. Number 7. You broke the pattern by believing what your spirit said over what your trauma felt. Most people stay trapped in cycles because they allow their past wounds to dictate their present. Trauma has a way of screaming louder than intuition, convincing you that fear, doubt, and pain are the only guides you can trust. But the chosen one made a different move. You chose to listen to your spirit instead of bowing to the weight of your trauma. That single, unseen decision broke patterns that generations before you couldn't escape. You didn't have to fight your past. You simply refused to let it continue steering your life. Trauma thrives when you react emotionally to old triggers. It demands attention, energy, and obedience. But by turning inward and trusting your spiritual compass, you refused to feed it. You prioritized clarity over chaos, alignment over fear. Every time your trauma whispered lies, your spirit spoke louder, and you followed that higher guidance. That one choice rendered every cycle built on fear, shame, or inherited pain powerless, because its foundation depended on your emotional reaction, and you no longer supplied it. Believing your spirit over trauma doesn't mean you ignored your pain. It means you acknowledged it without letting it control you. You processed, observed, and learned from it, but you didn't allow it to dictate your decisions, reactions, or growth. That difference is subtle to the outside world, but seismic to the universe around you. Where others would relapse into old habits, react predictably, or repeat generational patterns, you moved forward in a way that was invisible, unstoppable, and irreversible. This move is profoundly liberating. It turns the old system of emotional manipulation, expectation, and inherited dysfunction on its head. People who expected you to remain captive to your wounds find themselves powerless because the tool they depended on, your emotional obedience, is gone. You didn't fight the trauma. You transcended it. By trusting your spirit over the echoes of your past, you became untouchable. You didn't just break the pattern, you removed yourself from its jurisdiction entirely, showing that true freedom comes not from resistance, but from alignment with what is eternal and true within you. Number 8, you didn't repeat their behavior. You examined it. Most people get trapped in cycles because they react instinctively, mirroring the very behaviors that harmed them. They lash out, argue, manipulate, or surrender, often without realizing they are playing the same game that created their suffering. But the chosen one made a move that changes everything. You stopped reacting and started observing. You didn't simply fight back or imitate what was done to you. You studied it, dissected it, and understood the mechanics behind it. That single shift allowed you to step outside the cycle entirely, seeing the pattern for what it was rather than participating in it. By examining the behavior instead of repeating it, you gained power that others couldn't touch. You saw the motives, the fears, the insecurities, and the manipulations driving the actions of those around you. And in understanding, you removed their ability to control or influence you. People who expected you to respond emotionally, predictably, or defensively found themselves facing a calm, deliberate presence that refused to be pulled into their chaos. They had trained you to perform in a certain way, but you refused the script and studied the play instead. This move is quiet but devastating. Awareness alone dismantles cycles because patterns rely on ignorance and unconscious participation. The moment you became fully conscious of the system operating around you, you no longer needed to fight it. You simply refused to feed it. Your energy, reactions, and attention were no longer available to power the cycle. You became a witness rather than a participant, and that subtle detachment confused and disarmed everyone who tried to manipulate you. Examining behavior instead of repeating it is a spiritual masterstroke. It transforms past pain into clarity, emotional traps into lessons, and manipulation into insight. You didn't just escape the pattern, you turned it into a blueprint, showing yourself exactly where the weaknesses and flaws were, all while remaining untouched. That unseen move, this quiet observation, is what allows you to break cycles decisively, leave the toxicity behind, and operate from a space of unshakable awareness and control. Number 9, you broke the pattern by refusing to carry emotional debts that weren't yours. Most people stay trapped in cycles because they carry burdens that were never theirs to begin with. They absorb guilt, shame, and responsibility for other people's failures, mistakes, and toxic behavior, and in doing so, they unknowingly feed the very patterns that were meant to control them. But the chosen one made a move that changes everything. You stopped carrying emotional debts that weren't yours. You refused to accept responsibility for what other people created, and that single decision shattered the system built to keep you bound. Patterns survive when you take on energy that doesn't belong to you. By responding to manipulation, blame, and projection, you give the cycle life, even if it's subconscious. You were conditioned to think that accommodating others, smoothing over conflicts, or taking the blame would preserve peace. But true peace, true freedom, comes from recognizing what is yours and what isn't. The moment you drew that line, the emotional chains that held you began to fall apart. You stopped fueling the pattern, and without your participation, it had nowhere to go. This move is subtle, invisible to the casual observer, but devastating in its effect. People who expected you to absorb their failures, repeat their mistakes, or react to their guilt found themselves powerless because the tool they relied on, your compliance, was gone. You didn't argue or fight. You simply stopped paying the debt you never owed. And in that refusal, you reclaimed not just your energy, but your authority over your own life. Refusing to carry emotional debts is more than just self-preservation. It's a spiritual realignment. It exposes the weakness in systems that thrive on borrowed pain and inherited trauma. It creates a space where you operate from clarity rather than reaction, sovereignty rather than obligation, and freedom rather than entanglement. By removing yourself from responsibilities that never belonged to you, you broke the pattern completely. You didn't just survive, you became untouchable, and the chains that were meant to control you dissolved silently, permanently, and invisibly. Number 10. You stopped giving your energy to situations that thrived on draining you. Most people remain trapped in cycles because they continue pouring energy into things that were never meant to sustain them. They argue, explain, fix, and overextend themselves in situations designed to exhaust, manipulate, or control. But the Chosen One made the move that changes everything. You withdrew your energy from what was depleting you. You didn't just walk away. You stopped fueling the systems, people, and patterns that thrived on your emotional investment. That single, unseen decision caused the cycle to collapse, because patterns survive on the energy of participation, not the mere existence of problems. Energy is life. When you give it to someone or something that feeds on chaos, dysfunction, or toxicity, you become a co-creator of the very cycle you want to escape. The moment you stopped responding, stopped explaining, stopped defending, and stopped rescuing, the entire system began to destabilize. You didn't need confrontation or drama. Your quiet refusal to supply your presence and attention was enough to dismantle the power structures around you. People who once controlled or influenced you found themselves confused and powerless because the resource they depended on, your engagement, was no longer available. This move is subtle but devastating in its effects. By refusing to energize what drains you, you create a natural authority that cannot be challenged. You become untouchable, not because you're stronger, but because the cycle literally cannot function without your contribution. Those who tried to manipulate or exhaust you find themselves frustrated, scrambling for impact, because their system requires active participation, and you chose to withhold it. Withdrawing your energy is more than just self-preservation. It's spiritual strategy. It shifts you from being reactive to being sovereign. It allows you to operate from clarity rather than chaos, freedom rather than entanglement, and power rather than depletion. By recognizing where your energy belongs and refusing to invest it in what was designed to drain you, you didn't just escape the cycle, you dismantled it entirely. Your unseen move redefined the rules, showing that true control is not about fighting. It's about conserving your power and letting the system collapse on its own. Number 11. You finally realized you never belonged to the pattern in the first place. Most people stay trapped because they believe the cycle they are in defines them. They think the hardships, limitations, and manipulations they experience are meant to shape who they are, when in reality they are only obstacles placed in front of someone destined to rise above. The Chosen One made a move that changed everything. You realize that you were never meant to belong to the pattern at all. That awareness alone dismantled the system, because once you understood you were not its product, you stopped cooperating with it, consciously or unconsciously. Patterns exist to contain, control, and predict. They rely on the assumption that you will accept the role assigned to you, that you will conform to expectations, repeat mistakes, and react according to their script. Once you understood that you were an exception, that your spirit, your purpose, and your trajectory were fundamentally different, the rules no longer applied. You didn't have to fight the pattern because it was never your territory to begin with. Your detachment was enough to dismantle it. This realization is liberating and terrifying at the same time. It shifts the way you see yourself, the world, and the forces that tried to contain you. Everything that seemed impossible, unfair, or controlling now loses its authority because it was never designed for you. People who tried to manipulate or trap you are left bewildered because the person they were trying to shape was never part of their system. You are untouchable in ways they cannot anticipate because your very existence is outside the boundaries they created. Understanding that you never belong to the pattern is more than clarity. It's sovereignty. It frees you from guilt, shame, and the illusion that you must earn space or approval. You stop participating in cycles that never had power over your essence. That unseen move, simply knowing who you truly are and where you actually belong, is the ultimate liberation. By removing yourself from the pattern entirely, you rendered it powerless, and in doing so, you proved that freedom is not about breaking chains. It's about realizing the chains were never yours to hold. Number 12. Your boundaries became the weapon you didn't know you were allowed to use. Most people underestimate the power of boundaries because they think they are just polite limits or social niceties. But the chosen one understands that boundaries are not optional. They are a form of spiritual armor, a weapon that dismantles cycles without a single confrontation. You made the move that changed everything. You finally enforced limits on what you would allow into your life, and in doing so, you broke patterns that had been operating for years. You didn't shout, negotiate, or justify your space. You simply claimed it, and that single act sent shockwaves through every system designed to contain or control you. Patterns thrive on access. They need your time, energy, patience, and tolerance to survive. They depend on your willingness to tolerate disrespect, manipulation, or dysfunction. The moment you drew a line and refused to cross it, everything built to exploit your compliance began to collapse. People who expected you to say yes, overextend, or accept chaos suddenly found themselves powerless because your limits were non-negotiable. Your boundaries became invisible barriers that no one could bypass, and for the first time, you were no longer available for the cycle to operate through. The brilliance of this move lies in its simplicity. You didn't need to fight or argue. The power was in your refusal to bend. You didn't have to prove yourself or explain your limits to anyone. They exist because you exist. By choosing yourself over the demands, expectations, and manipulations of others, you created a space where nothing could infiltrate without your consent. That alone disarms people who relied on your openness, predictability, or compliance to maintain control. Boundaries are not just protection. They are liberation. They shift the balance of power, turning what was once a tool of manipulation into a shield and a weapon. The unseen move of claiming your space, protecting your energy, and refusing to allow others to overstep dismantles cycles, frustrates manipulators, and establishes a new standard for how you are treated. By enforcing your limits, you didn't just defend yourself, you broke patterns, reclaimed authority, and became untouchable in a way no one saw coming. Number 13. You broke the pattern by becoming emotionally self-sufficient. Most people remain trapped in cycles because they rely on others to validate, comfort, or complete them. Emotional dependence creates a loop where patterns thrive, feeding off the insecurity, neediness, or unresolved wounds of their target. But the chosen one made a move that changes everything. You became emotionally self-sufficient. You stopped needing others to fill your gaps, approve your choices, or soothe your fears. That single shift rendered old cycles powerless, because the fuel they required, your emotional dependence, was no longer available. Emotional self-sufficiency doesn't mean you became cold or detached. It means you learned to meet your own needs, regulate your own energy, and validate your own worth. You no longer looked for approval or protection from those who previously held influence over you. People who relied on your reactions, compliance, or vulnerability suddenly lost their leverage because the very thing that kept the cycle alive, you being emotionally available on their terms, was gone. They were expecting someone to respond, react, or conform, but you had upgraded your internal resources, making them irrelevant. The brilliance of this move is that it operates quietly but decisively. No confrontation, argument, or drama was necessary. By being self-sufficient, you created a natural boundary that couldn't be crossed. You became untouchable, not through force, but by no longer offering the access that patterns require to survive. Those who thrived on manipulating, controlling, or triggering, you were left scrambling, powerless against a force they never anticipated, your independence. Emotional self-sufficiency is more than a skill. It's a spiritual weapon. It shifts your energy from being reactive to being sovereign. It ensures that your peace, your clarity, and your purpose are no longer contingent on external approval, conditions, or control. By taking full responsibility for your emotional state, you broke the cycle completely. The unseen move of relying on yourself above anyone else dismantles manipulation, closes the loops that held you, and positions you as a force that cannot be contained or predicted. You didn't just survive, you became untouchable from the inside out. Number 14. Your spirit stopped negotiating with what your destiny outgrew. Most people remain trapped in cycles because they try to force their lives to fit circumstances, relationships, or expectations that no longer serve their higher purpose. They negotiate with situations, compromise their growth, and stretch themselves thin to maintain connection with what has already passed its expiration date. But the chosen one made the move that changed everything. You stopped negotiating with what your destiny had already outgrown. You refused to bend, adjust, or rationalize situations that no longer aligned with your next level. That single, unseen choice dismantled patterns that had controlled your life because your spirit chose alignment over compromise. This move is subtle, yet seismic. By no longer negotiating with what no longer fit, you cut off the energy that perpetuated cycles of frustration, stagnation, and repeated failure. People and situations that thrived on your patience, your compromise, or your attachment suddenly lost influence because you refused to engage with what was not meant for your future. You weren't reactive, angry, or dramatic. You were aligned. Your presence, energy, and attention were reserved for paths, people, and choices that resonated with your evolving destiny. That invisible recalibration disrupted every pattern that relied on your continued involvement. The brilliance of this move is that it's invisible to those still trapped in cycles. They may see you as distant, quiet, or uncooperative, but the truth is your spirit is simply operating on a higher frequency. Patterns cannot survive in spaces where the energy required to sustain them is withdrawn. By prioritizing your alignment with destiny over temporary comfort or familiarity, you dismantled every trap that expected your compliance, predictability, or compromise. Stopping negotiation with what you outgrew is not just a decision, it's a declaration of sovereignty. It shifts your life from reaction to intentionality, from limitation to expansion, and from bondage to freedom. Your unseen move was not resistance, it was evolution. By refusing to remain entangled in what no longer serves your purpose, You broke patterns at their source, leaving them powerless and proving that true mastery comes not from fighting the old, but from fully embracing the new. Conclusion. Breaking patterns isn't about force. It's not about loud declarations, dramatic exits, or proving yourself to anyone. True mastery comes from unseen moves, the quiet, internal shifts that dismantle cycles faster than confrontation ever could. You, the chosen one, didn't just survive the traps set before you. You transcended them. Every single move, from choosing internal order over external approval, to refusing to carry emotional debts that weren't yours, to trusting your spirit over trauma, was a declaration that you operate on a higher level, a frequency that cannot be manipulated, predicted, or contained. Your evolution is the unseen force that disrupts everything built to hold you down. You became unpredictable by thinking for yourself. You became untouchable by becoming emotionally self-sufficient. You dismantled cycles simply by withdrawing energy from situations that thrived on draining you. You outgrew the systems, the expectations, and the limitations designed for anyone who didn't know their true power. Every pattern, every trap, every manipulation failed not because of anger or resistance, but because you stopped participating. You refused to feed the old loops, and in that refusal, the cycles collapsed quietly but permanently. What sets you apart is not just what you've done, it's how you did it. You moved silently, deliberately, and intelligently. You understood the mechanics of the traps around you, observed them, and then chose alignment over reaction, sovereignty over compromise, and destiny over conformity. Your life is no longer a replay of what others expected or a mirror of patterns they created. You are the exception. You are the evolution. You are the disruption. So hold this truth close. The unseen moves, the quiet power, and the invisible mastery you wield are what break patterns completely. Nothing can contain you when you operate from this level of awareness, self-sufficiency, and spiritual alignment. This is your proof that being the chosen one isn't just about surviving. It's about rewriting the rules and stepping fully into the life that was always meant for you. If this video opened your eyes and shifted your perspective, don't just keep it to yourself. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this, like the video to show support, comment with your thoughts and experiences, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Every action you take helps us continue spreading these powerful truths and keeps you connected to the energy of growth, awareness, and unstoppable alignment. God bless you.